When my husband screamed, "Get out of my house," I smiled. He had no idea that the marble floors he stood on, the cars in the driveway, even the air conditioning keeping him cool, I paid for it all. Want to know what happened when I actually left? Buckle up. Before we get into how I dismantled my husband's entire world with one bank transfer, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You're going to want to follow this channel because we share real stories about real women who refuse to be disrespected. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been underestimated? Now let me tell you my story. My name is Clarissa, and I need you to understand something right from the start. I'm not telling you this story because I'm bitter. I'm telling you this story because every woman needs to know what happens when you forget your own worth. And trust me, I forgot mine for a while. But baby, when I remembered, the whole world shifted. Let me take you back 7 years. I was 35 years old, sitting on top of the world. I'd built a software company from absolutely nothing. Started in my tiny apartment with a laptop and a dream, writing code at 3 in the morning because that's when my mind worked best. By the time I hit 35, my company was worth millions. We provided cybersecurity solutions for major corporations, and honey, business was booming. I had the house in Atlanta, the cars, the lifestyle that little girls dream about. But you know what I didn't have? Love, real companionship, someone to share it all with. That's when I met Gerald. Tall, handsome, came from one of those families with a prestigious last name. The kind of name that opened doors, you know? His grandfather had been somebody important back in the day, and Gerald carried himself like royalty. When he walked into a room, he commanded attention. And girl, I fell hard. He was charming, sophisticated, knew all the right things to say. He took me to nice restaurants, introduced me to his family, made me feel like I was finally getting the fairy tale I deserved. We got married within a year. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I ignored. My best friend pulled me aside at my bridal shower and said, "Clarissa, are you sure about this?" Something feels off, but I was so caught up in the romance, in the idea of finally having a partner, that I brushed it off. I told myself she was just being overprotective. I wish I'd listened. Here's what I didn't know. Gerald's family name. That was all they had left. The money was gone. The business had failed 2 generations ago. They were living off fumes and reputation. Gerald himself had a mediocre job in middle management that barely paid $60,000 a year. But he never told me he was struggling. He let me think we were equals, that he was bringing something to the table. And because I loved him, I never pushed. I never asked the hard questions. After we got married, things started changing. Slowly at first, then all at once. Gerald quit his job 3 months in, said he wanted to focus on us and build our empire together. I supported it because I thought he meant he was going to start his own business or help me with mine. But that's not what happened. Instead, he started calling himself the CEO of our household, started inviting his friends over all the time, acting like he was the one who built everything, popping bottles of champagne that I paid for, smoking cigars on the terrace of the house that my money bought. The worst part? He started introducing me differently. Before we got married, I was Clarissa Thompson, tech entrepreneur, the woman who built a multi-million-dollar company. After we got married, I became Gerald's wife, just his wife. Like everything I'd accomplished meant nothing compared to being attached to his name. At parties, His friends would ask what I did, and before I could answer, he'd jump in with, "Oh, she does some computer stuff." But really, she's focused on supporting me. Supporting him do what? Absolutely nothing? I watched it happen in real time. Watched him take credit for my success. Watched him diminish everything I'd worked for. And the craziest part? I let it happen. I convinced myself that's what marriage was supposed to be. That I was supposed to make him feel like the man, even if it meant making myself smaller. Girl, the lies we tell ourselves when we're in love. His mother and brother were just as bad. They treated me like I was lucky to have married into their family. His mother would come over and rearrange my furniture, telling me how things were done in proper households. His brother would drop by unannounced, expecting me to cook for him, to serve him like I was the help. And Gerald never said a word, never defended me, never told them that this was my house, my life, my rules. Then came the day everything changed. I'd been on a business trip to California, and I'd just closed the biggest deal of my career, $50 million. My company was about to expand into 5 new states. I was on top of the world, flying back home early to surprise Gerald and celebrate. I walk through my front door at 9 o'clock at night, and there's music blasting. There's people everywhere. Gerald is throwing a party in my house, and he never even told me about it. I'm standing there in my business suit carrying my laptop bag, and nobody even notices me at first. Gerald's holding court in the living room, telling stories, playing the big shot. His mother is there, sitting on my white couch with her shoes on, something she knew I hated. His brother is raiding my liquor cabinet like it's a free bar, and I just stood there watching, feeling something inside me crack. I put my bag down quietly and walked over. I said, very calmly, "Gerald, can I talk to you for a minute?" He looked at me like I was interrupting something important, like I was the inconvenience. He said, "Not now, babe. I'm with my people." His people, in my house, drinking my liquor, sitting on my furniture. I tried again. I said, "I just need 5 minutes." This wasn't a good time for a party. I had a long flight and I'm exhausted. That's when his mother stood up. She looked at me with such contempt and said, "Clarissa, maybe you should learn some hospitality." A good wife doesn't complain when her husband wants to entertain. Something in me snapped. I said, "With all due respect, this is my home, and I'd appreciate it if everyone could keep their voices down and respect the space." It was such a reasonable request. I wasn't even asking them to leave, just to be considerate. But Gerald? Gerald lost his mind. He stood up, walked over to me, and in front of all those people, he said, "You know what? I'm sick of this. This is my house. These are my guests. And if you don't like it, you can leave. Get out of my house." The room went silent. Everyone was staring. His mother had this satisfied smile on her face, like she'd been waiting for this moment. And me? I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved, this man I'd supported, this man who'd contributed exactly nothing to our life together, and I smiled. I actually smiled. I said, "Okay." Just like that. "Okay." And I turned around and walked straight to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time in years, I saw everything clearly. I pulled out my laptop and opened all my financial documents. The house deed, my name. The cars in the driveway, my name. The bank accounts, my name. The investment portfolios, my name. Even the furniture, the art on the walls, the dishes in the kitchen. I'd bought it all. Gerald hadn't contributed a single dollar to our life. Not one. Thank God for my best friend, who'd insisted I keep my finances separate. Thank God I'd listened to my attorney, who drafted an ironclad prenuptial agreement. Thank God I'd never been foolish enough to add Gerald's name to anything. In that moment, sitting on my bed while my husband partied downstairs in a house that wasn't his, I realized something powerful. He'd told me to leave my own house. And you know what? I was going to do exactly that. But I wasn't leaving anything behind. The next morning, I woke up and acted completely normal. Made breakfast, smiled at Gerald, didn't say a word about the night before. He probably thought he'd won, that he'd put me in my place. While he slept in, I called my attorney, then my accountant, then my financial advisor. I set up a meeting for Monday morning, and I started making a plan. That weekend, I documented everything. Every disrespectful comment. Every time he'd taken credit for my work. Every dollar I'd spent while he contributed nothing. I took photos, saved text messages, built a case. Not because I wanted to destroy him, but because I knew he'd try to destroy me when he realized what was happening. Monday morning came. I put on my best suit, the black one that made me feel powerful, and I walked into my attorney's office. We sat down, spread everything out on the table, and went through it all. By the end of that meeting, I knew exactly what I was worth. $400 million. That's what my company was valued at, plus all my investments, properties, and assets. $400 million. Gerald had $18,000 in his personal account, money that I'd given him as an allowance. The irony was almost funny. My attorney looked at me and said, "Clarissa, you could drag this out, make it messy, make him pay for how he's treated you. Or you could make a clean exit, take everything that's yours, and never look back." I chose the clean exit. Not because he deserved my mercy, but because I deserved my peace. Tuesday, I filed for legal separation. Not divorce yet. That was strategic. I wanted him to have time to understand what he'd lost before we made it permanent. Wednesday morning, I closed on a penthouse downtown. Paid cash. $3 million for my fresh start. That afternoon, I came home to execute the plan. I'd hired movers, and they were already there, packing up my things. My clothes, my art, my books, my personal items, everything that mattered to me. Gerald came home right in the middle of it. He walked through the door and just stopped, stared at the boxes, the movers, me standing there supervising it all. He said, "What's going on? What is this?" And I said, very calmly, "I'm leaving." "You told me to get out of your house, remember? So I'm getting out." He laughed, actually laughed like I was joking. He said, "Baby, I didn't mean it like that. I was just upset. You can't just leave." I said, "Watch me." His face changed, went from amused to confused to angry in about 3 seconds. He said, "You can't take all this stuff. Half of this is mine." That's when I handed him the folder. A thick manila folder with every document, every receipt, every proof of purchase. I said, "Show me one thing in this house that you paid for. Just one." He opened that folder and I watched his face go pale. Page after page of evidence that he'd contributed nothing. The house deed in my name. The car registrations in my name. Bank statements showing that every deposit came from my accounts. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. He said, "The house? The house is yours?" I nodded. "The cars?" I nodded again. "Everything?" I smiled and said, "Everything." He started panicking then, started yelling about how I couldn't do this, how he was my husband, how I owed him. I just stood there, calm as could be, and said, "Gerald, you told me to leave your house. Turns out, it was never your house. It was always mine. The cars are mine. The bank accounts are mine. The country club membership you love so much? Mine. And as of this morning, you no longer have access to any of it." I wish you could have seen his face. It went from angry to shocked to devastated in seconds. He said, "You froze my credit cards?" I said, "Those weren't your credit cards. They were mine, connected to my accounts. And yes, they're frozen." He stumbled backward and sat down on the couch, my couch, and just stared at nothing. His mother called 5 minutes later. He answered, and I heard him trying to explain, trying to tell her that I was taking everything, that I was being cruel, that I was destroying him. I heard her voice through the phone, sharp and angry, demanding to know what he meant. And then I heard the moment she realized the truth. The silence on the other end, the quiet "oh" of understanding. Over the next few days, Gerald tried everything. He called my office 20 times a day until I had security block his number. He sent flowers, cheap ones, from the grocery store, because that's all he could afford now. He showed up at my new penthouse, but the doorman turned him away. He even tried to get his attorney to threaten me, but when his lawyer saw the prenup and the financial records, he basically told Gerald there was nothing he could do. His friends started distancing themselves. The ones who'd partied at my house, who'd eaten my food and drunk my liquor, while treating me like I was invisible, suddenly had questions. They wanted to know whose house it really was, whose money had paid for everything. And Gerald had to admit, over and over again, that it was all mine, that he'd had nothing. The humiliation broke him. This man who'd spent 2 years acting like he owned the world had to face the reality that he owned nothing. He had to move into a small apartment in a part of town he'd never even driven through before. Had to go back to work, hat in hand, begging for his old job back. Had to tell his mother that she couldn't come visit because his place was too small. Had to see his brother's pity every time they talked. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I threw myself back into my work with a passion I'd forgotten I had. My company went public 6 months after I left Gerald, and overnight, my net worth jumped to $520 million. Forbes called for an interview. Bloomberg wanted to feature me. Suddenly, I was everywhere. Magazines, podcasts, news segments about successful women in tech. And Gerald saw every single one. Every time he turned on the TV or walked past a newsstand, there I was, smiling, successful, thriving without him. Each success was a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away, what he'd never deserved in the first place. We finalized the divorce about 8 months after I left. The prenup held up perfectly. He got nothing. Not a dollar, not a house, not a car. Nothing. His attorney tried to argue for alimony, and my lawyer actually laughed. Pulled out all the records showing that I'd supported him entirely during our marriage. That he'd contributed nothing. That if anyone deserved alimony, it was me. The judge signed the papers, and just like that, I was free. Free from a man who'd tried to make me small. Free from a family that had never respected me. Free from the weight of trying to be someone I wasn't. Now I wake up every morning in my penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I run a company worth over $500 million. I travel when I want, invest in causes I believe in, mentor young women who remind me of myself. And I never, not for 1 second, regret walking away. Here's what I learned, and I need you to hear this. Your success is yours. Your accomplishments are yours. Your money is yours. Never let anyone make you feel like you need to shrink yourself to make them comfortable. Never let anyone take credit for what you built with your own hands. And never, ever forget your worth. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Those red flags I ignored, they were there from the beginning. I just chose not to see them because I wanted love so badly. But real love doesn't ask you to be smaller. Real love doesn't diminish your achievements. Real love celebrates you, supports you, and stands beside you as an equal. Gerald wanted me to leave his house, so I left, and I took everything that was actually mine, which turned out to be everything. His pride couldn't survive that truth, and honestly, that's not my problem. I didn't break him. He broke himself by believing lies about who he was and what he'd earned. So that's how I moved $400 million and broke a grown man's pride. But here's what I want you to take from this. Never, and I mean never, let anyone diminish what you've built. Protect your assets, know your worth, and don't be afraid to walk away. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with any woman who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have left sooner, or would you have stayed and tried to fix it? I read every single comment. And if you want more stories about women who refuse to be broken, hit that notification bell.